The night Gavin left, the wind tore through the cornfields like it had a grudge. A single truck turned off the gravel road, its headlights shrinking until they disappeared, and the silence that followed felt louder than any goodbye. Kate stood on the porch in her coat, one hand on the railing, the other pressed to her chest, waiting for a reason that never came. No argument, no confession, no last kiss, just absence, sharp and unfinished, like a sentence cut in half. Weeks became months. Months became years. Seasons rotated through the town the way they always did: harvest, frost, thaw, bloom, while Kate learned how to breathe around the shape of her own unanswered questions. She didn't stay frozen in grief. She didn't beg the past to return. She rebuilt, quietly and fiercely, until the woman he abandoned didn't exist anymore. And then, on an ordinary afternoon that looked like every other, Gavin came back. Not as the boy who ran, but as a man carrying the weight of what pride had stolen from him. He stepped into town like someone walking into a courtroom, eyes lowered, jaw tight, like he already knew the verdict. Because the truth was simple, brutal, and unavoidable. He didn't return to be loved. He returned to face what he had destroyed. But when Kate finally looked him in the eye again, the question wasn't, "Why did you leave?" It was the one that could change everything. Was it too late? Stay until the end, because the moment Kate decides what Gavin deserves isn't a scene of begging. It's a scene of power, and it will break his pride or redeem his heart. If you believe second chances only count when there's real change, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts and comment, "Too late?" Because what happens next will make you rethink what love is supposed to look like. Kate had always known the difference between a storm outside and a storm inside. The first one came with thunder, wind, and a sky that warned you ahead of time. The second one came in silence, in pauses, in the way someone stopped meeting your eyes. That night, Gavin's silence felt like a door slowly closing. Not slammed, not dramatic, just quietly shut, as if he hoped she wouldn't hear it. But Kate heard everything. They had been building a life in pieces. Small, honest pieces. A rented house near the edge of town where the porch light flickered and the mailbox leaned. A shared grocery list with his messy handwriting and her neat little check marks. Talk of buying land someday, maybe closer to the river, maybe closer to the hospital. Talk of kids not as a fantasy, but as a possibility they were learning to deserve. Kate liked the steadiness of that dream. Gavin pretended he did too, until the world asked more of him. It started with a phone call he took outside. Kate watched through the kitchen window as his shoulders tightened, his stance turning rigid. He kept pacing, one hand rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he felt cornered. When he came back in, his smile looked practiced, like a suit he didn't like wearing. He kissed her forehead and asked about dinner as if nothing had happened. But his eyes weren't in the room. They were already somewhere else. Gavin was ambitious, but not the loud kind. He didn't brag about his plans, didn't talk about money like it was a trophy. He was the kind of man who carried pressure like it was his responsibility alone. The kind who thought love meant protecting someone from your fear. So when the opportunity came, an expansion deal, a contract big enough to change everything, he didn't bring Kate into it. He carried it like a secret, and secrets grow sharp edges over time. Kate felt the shift before he admitted anything. He stayed up later, laptop open, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. He stopped asking her opinion, stopped telling her the small details of his day. He laughed less, touched her less, moved through the house like he was afraid to settle. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at the wall as if he was calculating escape routes. And when she asked, gently, "Are you okay?" he'd answer, "Yeah." Too fast, too final. The town noticed, too, because small towns always do. The cashier at the diner asked Kate if Gavin was traveling for work again. The neighbor mentioned seeing his truck out late near the highway. Even Pastor Ray, who never pushed, said, "Tell Gavin we missed him at service." Kate smiled through it, kept her voice calm, kept her posture steady. But inside she was beginning to feel that old, primal panic, the kind a woman feels when love starts slipping out of her hands without explanation. On the day everything broke, it wasn't dramatic at first. It was quiet, almost ordinary. like betrayal always is. Kate came home from the hospital with her hair pinned back, scrub top wrinkled, hands tired. She found the living room too clean, like someone had erased signs of life. Gavin's jacket was gone from the chair. His boots were gone from the mat by the door. And on the kitchen table, there was a single envelope with her name on it. Her heart didn't drop. It froze, because her body knew before her brain caught up. A letter wasn't a conversation. A letter was what you left when you didn't have the courage to face someone's eyes. Kate stood there for a full minute without touching it, breathing shallow as if moving would make the truth louder. Then she sat down, slowly, and slid a finger under the flap. The paper inside was folded once, clean and deliberate. There were no long explanations, no apology written in paragraphs, no messy honesty, just a few lines that felt like they had been edited for distance. Kate, I'm sorry. I can't do this right now. I need to go. Please don't try to find me. This isn't your fault. And at the bottom, his name, Gavin, written like a signature on a contract. Like he was closing a deal. Like he was closing her. Kate read it twice. Then a third time, as if repetition could change the meaning. But the words stayed cold. They didn't explain anything. They didn't honor what they'd built. They didn't even give her the dignity of a reason. The worst part wasn't that he left. It was that he left her alone, inside the question. And questions are the cruelest place to live. She tried calling him once, straight to voicemail. She texted once, Gavin, what is happening? Are you safe? No reply. She drove to the last place she knew he'd be, his small office near the hardware store. The door was locked. The blinds were down. His nameplate had been removed like he'd never existed there. Kate sat in her car and stared at the empty building until her eyes burned. Then she drove home, hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, the house felt like a museum of almost. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. 2 mugs drying on the rack, one still stained with his coffee. A blanket on the couch that still smelled faintly like his soap. Kate walked from room to room, touching objects like she could summon him back by finding the right memory. But the walls didn't answer. And the silence didn't soften. She cried once, hard, sudden, like a break in a dam. Not the graceful crying of a movie scene. The ugly kind that steals your breath and makes you feel small. Then just as suddenly it stopped. Because something inside her refused to let that be the ending. She wiped her face, stood up, and looked at her reflection in the dark window. Her eyes were swollen, but they were awake. And she whispered, no, not like this. The next morning she went to work anyway. She showed up at the hospital with her shoulders squared and her hair pinned tight. She moved through the halls like she always did, efficient, focused, capable. No one knew what had happened yet, and she didn't offer it. She stitched wounds, checked vitals, comforted frightened families. She did her job as if the world hadn't just cracked beneath her feet. But in the quiet moments, washing her hands, walking to supply, the question returned like a bruise being pressed. Why? By the 3rd day, the town knew. It spread the way cold weather does, fast and inevitable. People meant well, but pity can be its own kind of cruelty. Maybe he'll come back, they said, like hope was a bandage. Men get scared, they said, like fear was a free pass. Kate nodded politely, kept her answers short. Inside, her dignity rose like a shield. She would not be the woman waiting on a porch forever, not for a man who couldn't even leave her a truth. On the 7th day, she did something small, but permanent. She took the letter and placed it in a box with other things she couldn't throw away yet. Then she changed the locks, not out of anger, out of boundary, out of survival. She didn't know if Gavin would ever return, but she refused to live like her life was paused, unfinished, dependent on his next move. If he wanted to come back someday, he'd have to meet a new version of her. That evening, she drove out past the cornfields to the old bridge over the river. It was where Gavin once promised her quietly, I'm not going anywhere. The water below moved on, indifferent, steady, faithful to its own direction. Kate leaned on the railing and let the cold air sting her cheeks. She didn't pray for him to return. She didn't beg the sky for answers. She simply said, out loud, to the wind and the river and herself. I will not break because someone chose to run. When she got back home, she turned on every light in the house. Not because she was afraid of the dark, but because she was done living in shadows. She opened the windows, let the air move through rooms that had held too much silence. Then she sat at the kitchen table, took a blank notebook and wrote one sentence: "My life will not be a question mark." Outside, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, and inside, Kate made her first quiet promise, the kind that would later become the ending that destroyed Gavin's pride. Winter arrived early that year. As if the town itself was in a hurry to go numb, frost clung to the fields every morning like a thin layer of grief. Kate drove to the hospital before sunrise, headlights cutting through fog. She learned to love the quiet of those drives, because silence was safer than questions. At work, she could be useful, precise, steady, someone people relied on. But the moment she stepped back into her empty house, the air felt heavier. Not haunted, just unfinished. At first, her mind kept reaching for Gavin out of habit. A funny story from a patient, a song on the radio, a new recipe she wanted to try. She would turn to tell him, then remember there was no one there. The realization hit in small, cruel waves, not one dramatic crash. His absence lived in ordinary places: the second toothbrush, the extra coat hook, the space in the bed. And worst of all, it lived in her thoughts when she tried to sleep, because night was when the unanswered became loud. People think abandonment is a moment, a goodbye, a door closing, a truck leaving the driveway. But Kate learned it was a season, one that kept repeating itself. Every time she saw a couple holding hands at the diner, every time she watched a father lift his child onto his shoulders at the Christmas tree lot, every time a patient squeezed her hand and said, "Don't leave me," her body remembered what her pride refused to admit. It still hurt. It still mattered. She didn't romanticize the pain. She didn't pretend it was beautiful or destined or part of some perfect plan. She let it be what it was: raw, confusing, humiliating at times. There were mornings she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, breathing through a panic she couldn't explain. There were nights she ate cereal for dinner because cooking for one felt like admitting defeat. And there were moments alone in the shower when she whispered, "Why?" until her throat ached. Not to God, not to the universe, just to the tile walls. The town tried to take care of her in its own small-town way. A casserole on the porch, a scarf left in her mailbox, a gentle hand on her shoulder at the grocery store, the kind that lingered with pity. Kate accepted the kindness, but she hated the looks that came with it, the ones that said, "Poor Kate." She got left, as if she were a story with a predictable ending, as if a man's decision could reduce her to a cautionary tale. She smiled anyway, because she refused to become bitter. But she also refused to be small. Her best friend, Maren, was the first one to say what no one else dared. "You don't need answers to move forward," she told Kate over coffee at the diner. "But you do need to stop bleeding alone." Kate stared into her cup, watching cream swirl like a storm dissolving. "I don't know how," she admitted quietly. Maren didn't give her a speech. She just reached across the table. "Start with one truth," she said. "You didn't deserve that." Kate swallowed hard because the simple validation almost broke her. And then she nodded once, like a promise. Kate began to create structure, because structure was how you survived chaos. She woke up at the same time. She ran on the same road beside the fields, even when her lungs burned from cold air. She meal prepped on Sundays, not because she loved it, but because control tasted like safety. She took on extra shifts at the hospital, not to avoid her feelings but to build something that belonged to her. If Gavin had left her with nothing, she would make her own life full. Not out of revenge, out of self-respect, out of quiet defiance. In late January, a storm took out power across half the county. The hospital ran on generators, nurses sleeping in chairs between patients. Kate worked for 16 straight hours, hair loose, hands cracked from sanitizer, eyes sharp with responsibility. An elderly man grabbed her wrist and said, "You're the only light in this place." She smiled softly, checking his oxygen. But inside, she thought, If you only knew how dark it feels when I go home." Still, she kept moving, because people needed her, and that need became a kind of purpose. One evening, after another long shift, Kate stopped by the old bridge again. Snow dusted the railing, and the river below looked like black glass. She watched the current and felt something inside her settle. Not peace. Not yet. But a decision forming. Slow and solid. She was tired of living in reaction to what Gavin did. Tired of measuring her worth by a man's silence. She breathed in and the air hurt her lungs, but she didn't flinch. "I choose me," she whispered into the wind. And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a lie. The next week she applied for a leadership position at the hospital. It wasn't glamorous, just a coordinator role for the community clinic program, but it would put her in charge of outreach, supplies, partnerships with farms and small businesses. It would make her visible in a new way. And visibility used to scare her because being seen meant being judged. Now, she was tired of shrinking. She walked into the interview with her shoulders square and her voice steady. When they asked why she wanted it, she said, "Because this town needs care that doesn't depend on luck." And she meant it, because she knew what it felt like when someone disappears. When she got the call that she'd been selected, she sat on her kitchen floor and laughed. Not a happy laugh at first, a shocked laugh. Then the sound turned into tears, warm and unstoppable. Maren came over with takeout and found Kate sitting there, hair a mess, cheeks wet. "You did it," Maren said, voice soft. Kate wiped her face and looked up. "I did," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly would undo it. And then, for the first time in months, she felt proud, without guilt. Proud without needing anyone's approval. Proud because she earned something in the middle of pain. With the new role came new responsibilities and new eyes on her. Farmers called her about clinic schedules. Mothers asked her for advice about fevers and vaccinations. The pastor asked if she could organize a health fair after Sunday service. Kate said yes, 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 because she was learning that purpose could anchor you. But she also learned to say no when she was tired. That was new. Kate used to say yes until she disappeared inside other people's needs. Now she protected her energy like it was sacred, because it was. Every once in a while, someone would mention Gavin like he was a ghost. A rumor about his success in the city. A headline someone saw online about a new development project. A distant cousin claiming they spotted him at an airport. Kate never asked for details, not because she didn't care, because she refused to let his name reopen a wound that was finally closing. She learned something essential that winter. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, day by day. And yet, there were nights she still wanted to know. Not because she wanted him back, because her mind hated unfinished stories. She would sit with a notebook and try to write the possible reasons. Fear, pride, money, family pressure, a secret he couldn't share. Then she would cross them out, one by one, because none of them justified cruelty. None of them justified vanishing. Kate stopped trying to solve him. She started studying herself instead. What she tolerated, what she needed, what she deserved. And in that study, she began to heal. Spring approached slowly, teasing the town with small signs of mercy. The first thaw, the first muddy roads, the first birds returning to bare trees. Kate took walks after work, letting the sunset paint the fields gold. She started buying fresh flowers for her kitchen table. Not for romance, not for a fantasy, for life. For proof that something beautiful could exist without anyone else. She'd stand there, arranging stems in a jar, and feel something soften in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hope, directed at her own future. A future she was finally claiming. One afternoon, a teenage girl came into the clinic with her mother. The girl looked frightened, eyes swollen like she'd been crying for days. Kate sat with her, spoke gently, offered water, offered quiet. After a while, the girl whispered, "He left. He just left." Kate's chest tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "I'm sorry," Kate said. and she meant it in a way that reached deeper than sympathy. Then she added, "But you're still here." The girl blinked, confused. Kate smiled softly. "That matters more than you think." And in that moment, Kate realized her pain was becoming something else. Not a cage, a bridge. That night, she opened the box with Gavin's letter again. She didn't do it with trembling hands this time. She did it like someone reviewing an old scar. She read the lines once, then folded the paper carefully. She didn't burn it. She didn't tear it. She simply placed it back in the box, closed the lid, and set the box high in the closet. Not hidden in shame, stored, like a chapter finished. Then she stood in the doorway of her bedroom, looking at the made bed, the clean sheets, the warm lamplight. And she whispered something new. If he ever comes back, it will be to a woman who knows her worth. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and new grass. Kate stepped onto the porch and watched the horizon, calm and wide. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel lonely anymore. Somewhere out there, Gavin was living a life she no longer followed. And here, in this small place, Kate was building a life that belonged fully to her. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't chasing. She was becoming. And that was the kind of ending pride can't stand, because it leaves no one to blame and no one to control. By the time summer rolled in, the town had stopped speaking Gavin's name like an open wound. It became a closed file people didn't want to reopen in public. The fields grew tall, the air turned sweet with hay and cut grass, and life kept happening. Kate kept happening too. Stronger, busier, steadier, in ways she didn't advertise. Her mornings began before the sun, her evenings ended after the clinic lights went dark. And somewhere between the exhaustion and the purpose, she became someone new. Not louder, not harder, just unshakable. She ran the community clinic program like it was a promise she refused to break. Twice a week, she drove out to farms where cell service died and the roads turned into dust. She set up blood pressure screenings in barns, vaccination tables in church basements, checkups in school gym corners. She learned people's stories the way she learned their symptoms, carefully, respectfully, without pity. Some families were struggling silently. Some were one accident away from losing everything. Kate didn't swoop in like a savior. She showed up like consistency. And in a small town, consistency is what becomes legend. Marin teased her for how serious she'd become about planning. "You have spreadsheets for your spreadsheets," she joked, sliding into the passenger seat one morning. Kate smiled, eyes on the road, ponytail swinging as she turned onto a gravel path. "It's not obsession," Kate said. "It's prevention." Marin glanced at her. "Since when do you talk like a general?" Kate exhaled softly. "Since I learned that life doesn't warn you before it leaves." Marin didn't laugh that time. She just reached over and squeezed Kate's arm. Because she understood. This wasn't about work. It was about control she'd earned back. The hospital started relying on Kate in ways it never had before. Doctors asked her opinion, not as courtesy, but as respect. The board approved her proposals because she didn't speak in dreams. She spoke in outcomes. She fought for better equipment, for more nurses, for mental health resources that rural towns pretended they didn't need. People started calling her Ms. Carter with a tone that carried weight. And every time she heard it, she remembered the version of herself who once felt small in her own home. She didn't resent that past Kate. She honored her, because she was the one who survived long enough for this Kate to exist. On the outside, Kate looked like she had moved on completely. And in many ways, she had. She laughed more now, real laughter, the kind that came from being present. She ate dinner with friends, hosted small cookouts, danced barefoot in her living room when no one was watching. She filled her calendar with purpose and her kitchen with fresh flowers. She learned how to be alone without being lonely. But there were still moments when her chest tightened unexpectedly, like when she saw a familiar truck model on the highway or heard a certain song at the grocery store. Not longing, just memory reminding her it once mattered. One afternoon in late July, a package arrived with no return address. It was plain brown paper, too heavy to be something casual. Kate opened it on her porch, sunlight warming her shoulders. Inside was a medical supply device the clinic had been requesting for months. New, expensive, untouched. There was no note, no card, no name. Just a shipping receipt folded neatly under the foam padding. Kate stared at it, confused, then walked it inside with careful hands. She checked the receipt once, twice, and her throat went tight, because the sender line wasn't blank. It had a company name she recognized from headlines, a company Gavin now owned. Marin came over that evening and found Kate still staring at the receipt like it might rearrange itself. "Okay," Marin said slowly, setting a bottle of lemonade on the table. "That's not nothing." Kate's voice was calm, but her fingers traced the paper like it was a bruise. "He didn't sign his name," she said. Marin leaned in. "But he wanted you to know." Kate looked up, eyes steady. "Or he wanted to feel better." Marin opened her mouth, then closed it again, because they both knew this. A gift wasn't repentance. It was a gesture, and Kate no longer sold her peace for gestures. Still, the timing felt too deliberate to ignore. Kate didn't tell anyone else. She installed the device at the clinic herself, trained her staff, updated the inventory records. She treated it like it belonged to the community, not like it belonged to him. But that night, when she finally lay down in bed, she didn't fall asleep right away. Her mind replayed the old letter, the blankness of it, the cruel simplicity. Then it replayed this new thing, something useful, something silent, something intentional. She hated that it stirred curiosity, because curiosity was the first step back toward questions, and Kate had fought too hard to escape that prison. The next day, the rumor started anyway. Small towns don't need proof, only patterns. Someone in shipping recognized the company name. Someone in administration saw the invoice. By lunchtime, a nurse whispered, "Do you think Gavin sent that?" Kate didn't look up from her clipboard. "It was an anonymous donation," she said flatly, but the nurse's eyes widened. "That's, kind of romantic?" Kate's jaw tightened, her voice gentle but firm. "No," she corrected. "It's kind of late." And the nurse, startled by the edge in her tone, walked away quietly. Kate exhaled and reminded herself. She didn't owe anyone a softer story than the truth. A week later, the town council announced an annual fundraiser for the hospital. A bigger one than usual. Music, food trucks, auction items, speeches. A whole evening meant to raise money for rural care. Kate was assigned as the event coordinator because she'd become the person people trusted to hold weight. She agreed without hesitation, then organized it like a mission. Sponsorship calls, vendor approvals, volunteer lists, press releases. And then the mayor's assistant sent her an email with the sponsor list. Kate scanned it once, then felt her stomach drop. There it was again, that same company name. And under it, in bold letters, primary sponsor, Gavin Hale Enterprises. It shouldn't have mattered. A sponsor was a sponsor. Money was money. The hospital needed it. Kate told herself she could handle it the way she handled everything else, professionally, cleanly, with boundaries. But her body didn't listen to logic right away. Her hands went cold. Her heartbeat picked up like it was bracing for impact. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then closed her laptop slowly. Not because she was scared of him, because she was scared of what his return would try to take from her, the peace she built without him. Marin didn't let her pretend she wasn't shaken. They sat on the porch steps that night, cicadas buzzing, warm air wrapped around them like a blanket. "You can do this," Marin said quietly. Kate stared out at the dark yard. "I know." Marin's voice softened. "Then why do you look like you're about to go to war?" Kate swallowed. "Because it feels like it." Marin nodded, understanding too well. "He left you with no answers." Kate's eyes stayed on the horizon. "And now he thinks he can come back with a check." Marin didn't argue. She just said, "Don't let him buy access to you." Kate whispered, "I won't," and meant it like a vow. The days leading up to the fundraiser felt like the slow approach of thunder. Kate prepared for it the way she prepared for emergencies. She planned, she organized, she controlled what she could. She ran through possible scenarios in her head like a nurse triaging a crisis. What if he tried to speak to her alone? What if he apologized publicly? What if the town pushed her to forgive for the sake of a happy ending? Kate decided something important in that planning. No one would write her story for her again. Not Gavin. Not the town. Not even her own old longing for closure. She would choose the terms of her own healing. On the morning of the fundraiser, the sky was painfully blue. No storm clouds, no warning signs. Kate drove to the park pavilion early, hair pinned, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up like armor. She supervised setup, checked sound equipment, adjusted table placement, greeted volunteers. She moved through the space like she belonged there, because she did. This event wasn't Gavin's stage. It was the town's, the hospital's, her community's. She refused to let his shadow swallow that. But as she walked past the entrance, she saw a sleek black SUV pull into the gravel lot. It didn't match the town's usual vehicles. It looked like a city thing. Expensive, polished, out of place. Kate's breath caught anyway. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall and well-dressed, posture controlled, hair darker than she remembered. He turned slightly and the sunlight hit his face, and for 1 second Kate's mind tried to rewind time. But time didn't rewind. It stayed exactly where it was. Years later, a different version of them both. He looked toward the pavilion, scanning the crowd. Not with arrogance, with caution. With the expression of someone who knew he didn't deserve to be welcomed. Then his eyes landed on her, and the world narrowed to a single brutal line between them. Kate didn't move. She didn't smile. She simply stood there, steady as a boundary. Gavin's face changed the moment he recognized her. Not relief. Something closer to disbelief. As if he had returned expecting a woman frozen in grief, and instead found someone standing in full light. Kate watched his throat bob as he swallowed. She watched his hands flex once at his sides, like he was fighting the instinct to reach for control. Then he took one slow step forward and stopped, because the way Kate looked at him made it clear. Approach was no longer automatic. Access had to be earned. The mayor walked up behind Gavin, clapping him on the shoulder like they were old friends. "Gavin Hale," he announced loudly, smiling at nearby volunteers. "Our hometown success story." People turned, heads lifted, whispers flared like matches. Some women smiled. Some men nodded with admiration. Someone said, "Can you believe he's back?" Kate felt the town's attention swing between them like a spotlight, and she hated it, not because she feared judgment, but because she refused to be entertainment for people who hadn't lived her nights. She straightened her clipboard, took a breath, and stepped forward, not as the abandoned girl, as the coordinator, as the woman in charge. When she reached him, she extended her hand, professional, polite, unshaking. Gavin stared at it for a second too long, like he didn't deserve even that contact. Then he took it carefully, his grip gentle, almost reverent. Kate met his eyes and felt something fierce rise in her chest. Not hatred, not weakness. Power, earned, quiet, immovable. "Mr. Hale," she said evenly, as if she were greeting any sponsor. His lips parted, like he wanted to say her name the way he used to. But what came out was smaller, honest. "Kate," he whispered, voice tight. You look..." She didn't let him finish. Her smile was slight, controlled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm running the event," she said. "If you're here to help the hospital, follow the schedule." Then she stepped back, leaving him standing in the exact place where his pride first began to crack. Gavin stood there after Kate stepped back, still holding the shape of her hand in his palm. He had imagined this return in 100 ways on sleepless nights. He had pictured tears, anger, yelling, anything that proved she still belonged to the past he could reach. But Kate's calm was something else entirely. It wasn't softness. It wasn't cruelty. It was distance built from survival, and it unsettled him more than any shout ever could, because it meant she didn't need him to feel whole. The fundraiser moved around them like a river that didn't care who was drowning. Volunteers carried trays of drinks, kids ran between tables, the band tested microphones. Kate walked away to check the sound system, speaking with staff, moving with purpose. Gavin followed her with his eyes the way someone watches a closed door they once owned. He reminded himself. He did not come back to take. He came back to give. To pay what he owed. But something in him still wanted control, wanted one moment where she looked at him the old way. He swallowed the urge like medicine, and waited for the right moment to speak, if she ever gave him one. When the speeches began, Gavin's name was announced with applause. The mayor praised his success, his generosity, his hometown loyalty. Gavin forced a smile, nodding at faces he half recognized. Inside, he felt sick, because loyalty was not what he had shown when Kate needed him most. He stood at the edge of the stage, hands clasped behind his back, and his eyes searched the crowd until they found her. Not sitting, not being celebrated, but working. She was adjusting chairs, calming a nervous volunteer, moving like the backbone of the evening. And in that moment it hit him. Kate had become the kind of woman a town leaned on. The kind of woman he ran from because she was too real to disappoint safely. After the applause faded, Gavin stepped off the stage and walked toward the clinic booth. He kept his pace measured, refusing to rush her, refusing to corner her. Kate was speaking to an elderly farmer, showing him pamphlets, smiling kindly. When she noticed Gavin approaching, her smile didn't vanish. It simply shifted into something neutral. She finished the conversation, thanked the man, then turned toward Gavin. Her eyes were steady, and her posture didn't change. "Is there a problem with the sponsor table?" she asked. It wasn't sarcasm. It was a boundary wrapped in professionalism. Gavin swallowed. "No," he said quietly. "Everything is fine. I just needed a minute." Kate nodded once. "Then make it quick. I have schedules to keep." The words were clean. The message was sharp. "You don't get unlimited access to me." They stepped a few feet away from the crowd, near a row of oak trees where string lights hung like small stars. The sound of laughter and music blurred behind them, but the space between them felt loud. Gavin stared at her for a second, as if trying to memorize details he didn't deserve anymore. She wore a simple dress, practical shoes, hair pinned back, no attempt to impress, but she looked beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with styling. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and didn't ask permission to survive it. Gavin opened his mouth, then hesitated, because every sentence he had rehearsed sounded weak in her presence. "I'm glad you're doing well," he started. Kate's face didn't soften. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't start with polite weather." Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, like someone who had spent years holding a weight alone. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, go back to your table." Gavin's throat tightened. "I didn't come back to pretend," he said. "I came back because I owe you a truth." Kate's eyes sharpened slightly. "You owed me that years ago." He flinched, like the words hit skin. "I know," he whispered. Kate waited, expression unreadable, as if she had learned not to give her emotions away for free. Gavin took a slow breath. "I left because I was scared." Kate's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but without humor. "Scared," she repeated. "That's your explanation?" Gavin shook his head quickly. "Not an excuse. An admission." His voice lowered. "I was offered a partnership deal that would have changed everything. Money, power, stability. But it came with pressure I didn't know how to carry." Kate's gaze didn't blink. "So you ran?" Gavin nodded once, shame visible in the line of his jaw. "Yes. And you didn't tell me," Kate said, each word precise. "Because you thought you had to do it alone." Gavin's eyes flickered. "Because I thought if you saw how afraid I was, you'd stop believing in me." Kate stared at him, and for a moment the lights in the oak tree reflected in her eyes like small flames. Then she said, "You didn't protect me from your fear, Gavin. You punished me for it." The sentence landed like a verdict. Gavin's shoulders dropped slightly, as if something heavy finally fell off him. Not relief, but the weight of being seen clearly. Kate continued, voice calm but unyielding. "You left without answers. You let me carry your absence like a scar in public." Gavin swallowed hard, eyes shining with something he refused to call tears. "I know," he said again, and this time it sounded like surrender. Kate didn't raise her voice, She didn't attack. She simply told the truth. And truth, when spoken without emotion, has its own kind of violence. Gavin looked down, then back up. I wanted to come back sooner. Kate's eyebrows lifted. But you didn't. Gavin's jaw tightened. I didn't think I deserved to. Kate's expression didn't change. You didn't. Not then. A group of volunteers passed nearby, laughing. Kate waited until they were out of earshot before speaking again. Do you know what it did to me? She asked softly. Gavin nodded once, but his eyes pleaded for a chance to speak. Kate didn't give it yet. It wasn't just heartbreak, she continued. It was humiliation. It was standing in a grocery store while someone asked if you'd found someone better. It was waking up at night thinking I missed something, that I failed something. Gavin's face twisted with pain. Kate's voice stayed controlled. It was training myself not to reach for you in my own house. Gavin's hands clenched at his sides. Kate. She held up one finger, stopping him. No, she said. Don't say my name like it's a key. It's not. Gavin went quiet, breathing through the shame that rose like a fever. He had built businesses, negotiated deals, handled boardrooms, but nothing had ever made him feel smaller than this moment. Kate stared at him, and he realized she was not here to punish him. She was here to protect herself. And the difference mattered. Why now? Kate asked finally. Why sponsor the hospital? Why show up like this? Gavin swallowed. Because I couldn't live with myself anymore. Kate's gaze narrowed. That's still about you. The words cut clean. Gavin nodded slowly. You're right. He took a breath, forcing the truth out without decoration. I kept succeeding, he said quietly. And it didn't feel like victory. It felt like I was building on top of something rotten. Kate didn't react. So he continued. Every time I won something, I remembered what I did to you. And I realized the best parts of me were the parts you believed in, before I proved you wrong. Kate's eyes flickered. Just once. Not forgiveness. Recognition. But she didn't give him comfort. She let him sit in his own confession. You sent the machine, Kate said. It wasn't a question. Gavin's chest tightened. Yes. Why anonymous? Gavin's eyes stayed on hers. Because if I signed my name, it would have been a trade. I didn't want the hospital to feel like it owed me gratitude. And I didn't want you to feel like you owed me softness. Kate held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said, You're learning. Gavin's breath shook. Those two words felt like the first drop of rain after a drought. But he didn't smile. He didn't reach for more. He simply nodded, accepting the smallest mercy, as if it were sacred. Kate looked past him toward the stage, where the mayor was still talking. I'm going to say something, she said, voice low. Gavin's body tensed as if bracing for a blow. You're not the villain in some story I tell myself, Kate continued. But you are responsible for what happened. Gavin's voice was hoarse. I am. Kate turned back to him. And I'm not the girl you left. The sentence didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a fact carved in stone. Gavin's eyes searched her face, like he was trying to find the old Kate hiding inside. But she wasn't hiding. She was gone. Or maybe she had grown into something he couldn't control anymore. Gavin took a slow step back, giving her space. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me tonight, he said. Kate blinked once, surprised by the restraint. I'm here to earn the right to be near you. Gavin continued, voice steady despite the tremor in it. Kate's lips pressed together. That's going to take more than donations. I know, he whispered. And it's going to take time, she added. I know, he repeated, and this time it sounded like commitment, not despair. Kate studied him the way she studied patience, looking for patterns, for honesty, for consistency. Then she said something that made his throat tighten. Time doesn't scare me anymore, Gavin. I've lived through years without you. His pride flinched at the truth. Because he realized she wasn't threatening him. She was reminding him she could survive his absence again. The wind shifted and a few leaves fell from the oak tree above them. Kate watched them drift down like quiet endings. You want to talk? She asked. Gavin's breath caught. Yes. Kate nodded once. Then we do it on my terms. Gavin's eyes held hers. Okay. No private corners. No late-night guilt. No dramatic speeches, Kate said. Gavin nodded, jaw tight. And no touching, she added, her voice gentle but firm. Not yet. Gavin's hands flexed, then relaxed. I understand. Kate's gaze didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. I'll give you one conversation, she said. And after that, you let me decide what happens next. Gavin's voice was barely audible. Thank you. Kate's eyes held a quiet warning. Don't waste it. Later, after the fundraiser ended and the crowd began to thin, Kate stayed behind to clean. She moved with her staff, stacking chairs, gathering trash, packing supplies. Gavin hovered near the edge of the pavilion like a man unsure whether he was allowed to exist in the space. Then, without being asked, he rolled up his sleeves and began carrying heavy tables. No speech, no announcement, just work. Kate watched him from across the pavilion, not letting herself read too much into it. But she noticed the way he didn't seek praise, the way he avoided the mayor's attention, the way he chose the heaviest loads silently, as if he had something to prove to himself first. Kate's chest tightened, not with longing but with a reluctant curiosity, because this didn't look like the Gavin who left. When the last table was folded, Kate finally approached him again. The night had cooled and the string lights cast a warm glow over tired faces and empty spaces. Gavin wiped his hands on his pants, looking up like he was waiting to be dismissed. Kate held her clipboard against her chest. You can walk me to my car, she said, matter of fact. Gavin's eyes widened slightly. Okay. They walked side by side, not touching, footsteps slow on the gravel. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was honest. Halfway to her car, Gavin spoke softly. I'm sorry I made you carry that alone. Kate didn't answer immediately. Then she said, You did. And that was enough for the moment. At her car, Kate unlocked the door and turned to face him. He stood a few feet away, hands at his sides, posture careful. You're staying in town? She asked. Gavin nodded. For a while. Kate's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Gavin's voice didn't waver. Because I need to face what I ran from, and because I want to help the hospital. No strings. Kate studied him, then she nodded once. Good. Gavin blinked, as if he hadn't expected agreement. Kate continued, voice calm. If you help, you do it quietly. You don't make this about your redemption story. Gavin's jaw tightened. I won't. Kate's gaze sharpened. And if I say stop, you stop. Gavin's eyes held hers, and something humbled settled over his face. I will, he said. Kate opened her car door, then paused. You want to know what destroys pride, Gavin? She asked softly. Gavin's throat tightened. What? Kate's eyes didn't leave his. It's not public humiliation, she said. It's realizing the person you hurt learned to live without you. Gavin flinched visibly like the words struck bone. Kate's voice remained steady. I don't owe you a second chance, she added. Not because I'm cruel, because I'm healed enough to choose. Gavin's eyes shone and he swallowed hard. I understand, he whispered, and it sounded like a man losing the last excuse he had left. Kate nodded once, as if concluding a medical chart. Good, she said. Then show me. She slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, leaving him in the glow of the string lights. A successful man learning what money couldn't fix. As Kate drove home, her hands were steady on the wheel. Her heart wasn't racing like it used to. She wasn't spiraling into hope or fear. She was simply aware, alert the way a woman becomes after surviving something sharp. Gavin was back, and the town would want a story they could smile at. But Kate wasn't a story for them. She was a woman with choices now. And the most powerful thing she'd learned since he left was this. Love wasn't proven by returning. Love was proven by what you did after you returned, when you realized you no longer had the advantage. Gavin didn't announce his return with grand gestures or dramatic apologies. The next morning, he simply showed up at the hospital, early, before the lobby filled. He wore a plain button-down, sleeves rolled, no suit, no entourage, no city shine. The receptionist recognized him and froze for half a second. Gavin offered a quiet nod, then asked for the facilities manager by name. Not the director, not the board. The man who fixed broken doors and kept lights on in a place that never slept. When the manager appeared, Gavin extended his hand and said, "Tell me what you need most." No speeches, just a question that sounded like surrender. Word traveled fast, of course. By noon, nurses were whispering in hallways, volunteers were craning their necks, and patients were squinting at him like he belonged on a billboard. Gavin ignored the attention the way a man ignores rain when he's already soaked through. He met with procurement, reviewed outdated equipment lists, sat with the clinic coordinator. He asked for numbers, timelines, and the quiet details no one cared about until something broke. He took notes himself, pen on paper, like he didn't trust devices to hold accountability. And when someone called him Mr. Hale with that reverent tone, he corrected them gently. "Just Gavin," he said. "I'm here to work." The humility looked unfamiliar on him, like a scar he didn't hide. Kate heard about his presence before she saw him. A nurse mentioned he'd been walking through the supply wing with a clipboard. A janitor said he helped move boxes without being asked. Maren texted, "He's here. Quiet. Focused. Not performing." Kate read the message, then slid her phone into her pocket like it didn't matter. She kept checking charts, coordinating clinic schedules, returning calls. She refused to let his existence rearrange her day. But when she finally turned a corner near the administrative hallway, she stopped. Because there he was, standing by a bulletin board, reading an outdated flyer like it held a confession. Gavin looked up and froze the moment his eyes found hers. No smile, no charm, just that tight, steady expression of a man trying not to ask for what he hasn't earned. Kate walked toward him with a folder in her hand, posture calm. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate. When she reached him, she spoke first, voice even. "You're in the wrong wing," she said. "Sponsors are being briefed in Conference B." Gavin shook his head. "I'm not here for a briefing." Kate's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why are you here?" Gavin held her gaze without flinching. "To fix what I can," he said quietly, "and to accept what I can't." Kate studied him like a nurse assessing a symptom. Then she nodded once, sharp. "Don't get in the way." Gavin's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I won't." He didn't. That was the first thing Kate noticed in the days that followed, how carefully Gavin stayed out of her path. He didn't corner her in hallways. He didn't ask her to talk for just 5 minutes. He didn't linger by her office like a man trying to trap a moment. Instead, he made himself useful in places she couldn't ignore without harming the hospital. He funded repairs for the aging generator system. No publicity attached. He upgraded the clinic van that broke down twice a month on farm roads. He arranged a supply partnership with a distributor to lower costs long-term. Things that weren't romantic. Things that were real. Kate hated how much that mattered. The board invited Gavin to speak at a meeting, to share his vision. Gavin declined. Not rudely, simply. "I'm not here to lead you," he said. "You already have leaders." Then, in a decision that made half the room blink, he added, "If you need someone to listen, I can do that." The board chair, an older woman with sharp eyes, leaned back and said, "Listening is rarer than money, Mr. Hale." Gavin nodded once as if she'd exposed him. "I'm learning that," he answered. And Kate, seated at the end of the table with her folders, felt something shift. Not in her heart, in her expectations. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast, summer thunder, sudden and heavy. The clinic van was scheduled to drive out to the southern farms with vaccines and blood pressure kits. Kate was in the supply room checking inventory when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Gavin holding a rain jacket and keys. "I heard the van's going out," he said. Kate's eyes narrowed. "Yes." Gavin kept his voice calm. "The roads flood near the creek. It's not safe alone." Kate folded her arms. "I've driven those roads in worse." Gavin didn't argue. He simply said, "Then let me drive." Kate stared at him like he'd offered something dangerous. "Why?" she asked. Gavin's jaw tightened. "Because if anything happens out there, I want it to happen to me first." The sentence sat between them like thunder. Kate's breath caught, just for a second. Then she said, "Fine, but you follow my schedule, and you don't speak for me." Gavin nodded. Understood. The drive out to the farms was quiet at first. Rain hammered the windshield, turning the world into blurred green and gray. Gavin kept both hands on the wheel, focused, careful. Kate sat in the passenger seat, checking papers, pretending the silence didn't have weight. At a stop sign near the old bridge, Gavin slowed and glanced toward the river. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Kate felt the shift and said, without looking at him, "Don't." Gavin's voice was rough. "I think about that night every time it storms." Kate finally turned her head, eyes steady. "Good," she said. "Then let the memory teach you. Not soften me." Gavin swallowed hard and nodded. The van moved forward, tires splashing through shallow water, and Kate realized he was letting her be firm without punishing her for it. That was new. At the first farm, an elderly woman named Mrs. Dalton greeted them on the porch. She squinted at Gavin, then at Kate, then smiled like she'd found a secret. "Well," Mrs. Dalton said, "look at you bringing help." Kate stepped forward, professional. "We're here for your checkup." Mrs. Dalton waved her inside, then leaned closer to Kate and whispered, "Is he the one who left?" Kate's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "Mrs. Dalton," she said, gentle but firm, "today we're here for your health." Mrs. Dalton blinked, then nodded, chastened. Gavin, standing behind Kate with the supply kit, lowered his eyes. He didn't defend himself. He didn't look offended. He looked ashamed. And for some reason, that silence made the whole moment feel less poisonous. They worked for hours, vaccines, blood pressure readings, medication refills. Gavin carried coolers, held doors, loaded boxes back into the van. He listened when Kate spoke, followed her lead, asked questions only when necessary. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was trying to be useful without taking control. At one point, a child started crying, scared of the needle. Kate knelt, spoke softly, distracted him with a story about a brave cowboy. Gavin watched from the side, face unreadable. Then, when the child calmed, Gavin handed Kate a bandage without a word. Small, quiet, consistent. Kate hated the warmth that tried to rise in her chest. Not because she wanted him back, because she knew warmth could become a doorway. On the way back, the rain eased into a soft drizzle. The sky opened with pale light, like mercy without promises. Gavin drove slower than necessary, careful around puddles. Kate stared out the window at the fields, then spoke without warning. "Did you ever miss me?" The question surprised even her. Gavin's hands tightened on the wheel. "Every day," he said quietly. Kate's voice stayed even. "Then why didn't you come back?" Gavin swallowed. "Because I didn't want to return as the same man who left." Kate turned her head slowly. "So you waited until you were better?" Gavin shook his head once. "No, I waited until I was honest." Kate's eyes narrowed. "That took you years." Gavin's voice broke slightly. "Yes." He didn't defend it. He didn't justify it. He let the truth stand there, ugly and bare. And that was the first time Kate felt something close to respect. Not for his leaving, but for his refusal to sugarcoat it. When they reached the hospital, Gavin parked and turned off the engine. He didn't move right away. The van was quiet, warm, smelling faintly of antiseptic and rain. Gavin stared at the steering wheel like he was choosing words carefully. "Kate," he said softly, "I'm not asking you to forgive me." Kate's mouth tightened. "Good." Gavin nodded. "I'm asking you to let me prove that the man you loved wasn't a lie." Kate's eyes flashed. "He was real. He was just not strong enough to stay." Gavin swallowed, then said, "Yes." Kate's voice lowered. "Do you know what that did to me?" Gavin's jaw clenched. "I'm starting to." Kate held his gaze. "Then keep starting." "Every day." Gavin nodded, eyes shining in a way that made him look younger and older at once. "I will," he whispered. That evening, Kate stayed late to finish reports. The hospital was quieter at night, hallways dim, machines humming softly. She walked past the maintenance room and saw Gavin inside with a wrench. A flickering light above the doorway had been bothering staff for months. Now he was on a ladder, working on it like he'd grown up doing repairs. Kate stopped, watching for a second. Gavin glanced down and froze, then climbed off the ladder quickly. "Sorry," he said, wiping his hands. "I didn't want to bother anyone." Kate's eyes lifted to the light, now steady and bright. "You're not bothering," she said. Gavin's breath caught as if he'd heard a miracle. Kate looked at him, expression controlled. "Just don't make this your stage," she added. Gavin nodded immediately. "I won't." Kate turned to leave, but something stopped her. A strange, unwilling thought. He's trying to fix things the right way. And that thought scared her more than anger ever did. The next day, the town paper ran a small article about the hospital improvements. Gavin's name was mentioned naturally because people loved redemption headlines. Kate read it during lunch and felt irritation rise, not at the improvements, at the story being told around them without her permission. When Gavin walked by later, she held the paper up. "I didn't ask for this," she said. Gavin's face tightened. "I didn't either." Kate studied him. "You didn't call them?" Gavin shook his head. "No, but I can stop it." Kate's eyes narrowed. "How?" Gavin's voice was steady. "I'll tell them to leave you out of it, and I'll refuse interviews." Kate stared at him, testing his sincerity. Then she nodded once. "Do it." Gavin didn't hesitate. "I will." And for the first time, Kate saw him choose her privacy over his reputation. That mattered more than money. A week later, the paper published a correction. Hospital upgrades supported by anonymous donor partnership. No photo, no quotes, no hometown hero storyline. Kate stared at the headline and felt something inside her loosen slightly. Because Gavin had done what he said he would do. And in her world, words were cheap. Consistency wasn't. Maren noticed Kate staring and raised an eyebrow. "Okay," she said. "That's something." Kate didn't smile. "It's the minimum." Maren smirked. "Still counts." Kate looked away, but her chest felt strangely quiet. Not forgiven, not safe, but less guarded than before. One night, another emergency came in. A truck accident on the highway. The ER filled fast, nurses moving like choreography. Kate took charge of triage, voice clear, hands steady. Gavin appeared near the doorway, not in scrubs, but ready. He didn't speak. He just started helping where staff directed, bringing water, moving supplies, calling contacts. At one point, a frightened teenager refused treatment, shaking, panicked. Gavin knelt beside him, speaking low and calm. Kate watched from across the room and felt her throat tighten. Because Gavin wasn't performing strength, he was offering it, quietly, for someone else, with no reward attached. After the rush, near midnight, Kate stepped outside for air. The parking lot was empty, the sky clear, stars sharp like pinpricks. She heard footsteps and turned to find Gavin a few feet away, hands in his pockets. He stopped immediately, respecting distance. Kate crossed her arms, exhaling slowly. "You did good tonight," she said, voice neutral. Gavin's eyes lifted. "I just followed directions." Kate nodded. Still, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just careful. Then Gavin said softly, "I'm sorry I wasn't like this when it mattered most." Kate swallowed, gaze fixed on the distant road. "I'm not ready to hear sorry," she said. "I'm ready to see change." Gavin nodded, accepting it like a sentence. "You will," he whispered. "Even if it takes my whole life." Kate went home that night and stood in her kitchen, staring at the flowers on her table. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. She thought about Gavin on the ladder, Gavin in the ER, Gavin in the rain on farm roads. She hated that her mind was collecting evidence, because evidence could become a verdict, and verdicts could open doors she had kept shut for years. Kate touched the rim of her mug and whispered to herself, "Don't confuse effort with redemption." But even as she said it, another truth hovered beneath it. Effort repeated day after day was how redemption began. Autumn arrived with a slow gentleness, as if the town was trying to make amends. The air turned crisp. The trees along Main Street lit up in amber and red. Kate's clinic schedule grew heavier. Flu season, harvest injuries, exhaustion, and families who never stopped working. The hospital felt like a heartbeat that couldn't pause, and Kate moved with it. Steady, capable, present. Gavin stayed in town, just as he promised, never announcing his plans. He rented a small house near the river, kept his car modest, his clothes simple. He didn't try to reclaim his old place in people's stories. He acted like a man willing to earn a new one. It was the sameness of his presence that began to change things. Not a sudden romantic moment, not a dramatic confession. Just Gavin showing up again and again, day after day, like repentance with a calendar. He fixed what he could without being asked. He asked permission before stepping into Kate's orbit. And when she said no, he didn't punish her with silence or pride. He nodded, accepted it, and kept serving the community anyway. Kate noticed that too. He didn't make his change dependent on her approval. He changed because he couldn't stand being that man anymore. And that kind of change was harder to dismiss. The hospital organized a volunteer weekend to repair the old clinic building out by the South Farms. The roof leaked, the walls needed paint, and the waiting room smelled like damp wood and time. Kate coordinated tools, supplies, and people with her usual precision. Gavin arrived early with a truck full of lumber and a quiet expression. Maren watched from the doorway and murmured, "He's not going away, is he?" Kate didn't look up from her list. "He can stay. He just can't take." Maren's gaze softened. "You're doing good, you know." Kate's pen paused for half a second. "Doing good at what?" she asked. "At not losing yourself," Maren said. "Even now." Kate swallowed, then nodded once. Because the truth was, she had almost lost herself once. She refused to do it again. Work started early. Men climbed ladders. Women carried paint buckets. Teenagers swept floors. Laughter echoed through a building that had held too much illness and worry. Gavin stayed on the roof most of the morning, hammering shingles into place with focused quiet. Kate moved through the rooms checking progress, answering questions, organizing food. She avoided looking up at him too often, as if eye contact might invite meaning. But meaning found her anyway. At lunchtime, she stepped outside and saw Gavin sitting alone on the clinic steps. His hands were dirty, his hair messy, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion. He looked like a man who had finally stopped performing strength. He looked human, and that made Kate hesitate. She approached with 2 water bottles, stopping a few feet away. Gavin looked up quickly, as if bracing for dismissal. Kate held out 1 bottle without expression. He accepted it carefully, like he didn't deserve even hydration from her hands. "Thanks," he said quietly. Kate nodded, then sat on the step above him. Still not close enough to touch. They drank in silence while the town worked around them, the sound of hammers and voices filling the air. After a minute, Gavin spoke without looking at her. "I didn't know how to be a man in front of you," he said. Kate's gaze stayed on the dusty parking lot. "That's not my fault," she replied. "I know," he whispered. "That's why it's unforgivable." The words sat heavy between them. Kate's chest tightened, but she didn't soften. "Not yet." Gavin took a long drink, then set the bottle down like his hands were tired of holding things. "When I got that deal," he said, voice low, "they wanted everything to look perfect." Kate didn't turn her head. "So you chose them?" Gavin flinched. "No. I chose my fear." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and Kate's fingers tightened around her bottle. He continued carefully, as if speaking might split him open. "My father used to say weakness is what gets you buried. He wasn't a gentleman." Kate's eyes flickered, the smallest sign of attention. Gavin swallowed. "I spent my whole life building a version of myself that couldn't be questioned." He stared at the ground. "And then you loved me. The real me." Kate's throat tightened. Gavin's voice dropped further. "That terrified me more than any business risk." Kate finally looked at him. His face was tense, but his eyes were raw. "Because if you saw me fail," he said, "you'd see I wasn't enough." Kate's voice was quiet but firm. "You weren't afraid I'd stop loving you. You were afraid I'd be right to." Gavin's eyes closed, like her accuracy hurt. "Yes," he admitted, and in that simple surrender, something inside Kate shifted, just slightly. Not forgiveness? Understanding. Understanding that didn't excuse the wound but explained the weapon. Kate stood abruptly, breaking the moment before it could become dangerous. She capped her bottle and said, "Lunch is over." Gavin nodded quickly, like he understood the escape. He stood too, careful to keep distance. Kate walked back inside the clinic, heart steady but mind unsettled. Because she had seen something real in his confession, a man admitting he was built wrong and trying to rebuild himself. That kind of truth was rare, but rare truth didn't erase years of silence. Kate reminded herself, empathy was not permission. Understanding was not surrender. Still, she couldn't deny it. Gavin's pride was no longer intact. It was being dismantled piece by piece. Later that afternoon, the roofwork went wrong. A board snapped. A ladder shifted. Someone shouted, and the world narrowed into instinct. Kate rushed outside and saw Gavin on the edge of the roof, one hand gripping the gutter, the other bracing a teenager who had slipped. The boy's face was pale, eyes wide with panic. Gavin's jaw clenched as he hauled him back safely, muscles shaking from strain. They both collapsed onto the roof surface, breathing hard. Kate's heart hammered, and she felt something hot rise, fear, sharp and immediate. Not for the teenager, for Gavin, and she hated that her body still reacted to him like he mattered. She hated it because it was proof that love doesn't die politely. When Gavin finally climbed down, his forearm was scraped and bleeding. Kate stepped forward instinctively, then stopped herself. He looked up at her, breathing still uneven, and she saw something in his expression. Not triumph, not pride, but a quiet shock, like he couldn't believe he'd been allowed to protect someone instead of abandon them. Kate reached into her kit, pulled out antiseptic wipes and gauze. She held them out, not touching him. "Clean it," she said. Gavin's gaze dropped to the supplies, then lifted to her face. His voice was hoarse. "Are you sure?" Kate's jaw tightened. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because infection is stupid." Gavin's mouth twitched with a sad, grateful smile. "Okay." He took the wipes carefully, like they were sacred objects. Kate turned away immediately, signaling the moment was over. But inside something warmed, unwanted, quiet, real. That evening, after everyone left, Kate stayed behind to lock up the clinic building. The sun was setting over the fields, painting the sky in bruised gold. She carried leftover supplies to her car, thinking the day was finally done. Then she heard footsteps and turned to see Gavin walking toward her slowly. He stopped a respectful distance away, hands open at his sides. "I need to tell you something," he said. Kate's shoulders tightened. "Make it quick." Gavin nodded. "I've been sober from control," he said, voice rough, almost bitter. Kate frowned. "What?" Gavin swallowed. "I used to manage everything, emotions, risks, people, because it made me feel safe. Leaving you was the worst thing I ever did. And I did it because I couldn't control how much you mattered." Kate's breath caught, angry and startled. Gavin's eyes shone. "That's the ugly truth." He exhaled slowly. "And I hate myself for it." Kate's voice went low. "Self-hate doesn't redeem anyone." Gavin nodded. "I know. That's why I'm changing, not punishing myself. Changing." The distinction hit Kate harder than she expected. Silence stretched, filled with crickets and distant road noise. Kate looked past him toward the fields. "You keep saying you're changing," she said. "But what do you want from me?" Gavin's throat worked. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said carefully, "I want a chance to be close enough to earn your trust." Kate's jaw tightened. "You want your place back." Gavin shook his head quickly. "No. I want a new place. If you ever decide there's room." Kate studied him, suspicious of softness. "And if I decide there isn't?" she asked. Gavin's eyes held hers. "Then I'll still stay honest," he said. "I'll still support the hospital. I'll still take responsibility. Because redemption isn't a transaction." Kate's throat tightened, annoyed at herself for feeling moved. She wanted to distrust him, but his answer didn't try to trap her. It set her free. And freedom is the one thing Kate never again traded away. Kate opened her car door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "You know what scares me?" she asked quietly. Gavin swallowed. Tell me. Kate stared at the steering wheel like it held a confession. It's not that you'll leave again, she said. It's that I'll let you back in, and I'll lose the version of me that survived you. Gavin's face softened in a way that didn't feel manipulative. I don't want you to lose her, he said. Kate's eyes narrowed. Most men do. They want the softer version. Gavin shook his head slowly. I want the whole you. The one who learned boundaries. The one who became strong. Kate's breath shook slightly. Gavin's voice dropped. Because if I'm asking for redemption, I have to love what your pain created too. Kate stared at him, stunned by the maturity of that sentence. It didn't erase the past, but it honored her growth. And that was something Gavin had never done before. Kate got into her car, but she didn't start the engine immediately. Gavin stayed outside, waiting, not pressing. Kate looked through the windshield at the fading sunset. She remembered nights she had begged the universe for answers and gotten nothing. Now the answers were standing outside her car. Quiet, humbled, patient. She didn't know whether that was mercy or danger. But she knew this. If she was going to open a door, it would be on purpose. Not because she missed him. Not because the town wanted a happy ending. Because he had become a man who could hold what he once dropped. Kate's voice was calm when she spoke. One dinner, she said, still staring forward. Gavin's breath caught. What? Kate turned her head slightly. One dinner. Public place. No heavy speeches. No touching. Gavin's eyes widened as if she'd offered him oxygen. Yes, he said quickly. Yes. Whatever you want. Kate's jaw tightened. It's not a gift. It's a test. Gavin nodded, reverent. I understand. They chose the diner on Main Street. Bright lights, familiar faces, nothing private. Kate arrived first, sat in a booth near the window, hands folded calmly. When Gavin walked in, conversations quieted for half a second. He ignored it, eyes focused on her like everything else was background noise. He slid into the booth across from her carefully, keeping distance. Kate didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply opened her menu like this was an interview. Gavin's mouth twitched with something like admiration and pain. I deserve this, he murmured. Kate's eyes lifted. This isn't punishment, she said. This is reality. Gavin nodded. Yes, and the simplicity of his agreement made Kate's chest tighten again. They talked about the hospital first. Practical things, safe things, budgets, staffing, farm outreach. The broken generator that had haunted them for years. Gavin listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, took mental notes. Kate watched how he didn't interrupt, didn't steer the conversation toward himself. Then slowly the talk moved toward the town, how it had changed, who had gotten married, who had passed away. Kate mentioned Mrs. Dalton's stubborn refusal to take her medication, and Gavin smiled softly. It was small, familiar, like an old version of them trying to breathe without demanding resurrection. Kate felt warmth rise again, and she hated how much she missed simple companionship, not the romance, the feeling of being understood. She reminded herself, missing comfort did not equal trusting the person who broke it. Halfway through dinner, Gavin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and immediately turned it face down without reading. Kate noticed. Work? She asked. Gavin's jaw tightened. Probably. Kate's eyes sharpened. Are you going to answer? Gavin looked at her, then at the phone, then back at her. No, he said simply. Kate blinked, surprised. You don't know what it is. Gavin's voice was steady. I know what this is. Kate's throat tightened and she forced her expression to stay neutral. Gavin added quietly, I used to choose work because it felt safer than love. I won't do that again. Kate stared at him, the words hitting deep. She wanted to dismiss it. But the phone remained face down, silent. And Gavin stayed present. Sometimes redemption starts with small choices. When dinner ended, Gavin walked her outside into the cool night air. The streetlights cast warm circles on the sidewalk, the town quiet beyond the diner windows. Kate stopped by her car and turned to face him. Gavin halted automatically a few feet away, hands loose at his sides. Thank you, he said softly. Kate's eyebrows lifted. For what? For giving me a chance to sit across from you without hiding, he answered. Kate held his gaze. Then she said, "Don't mistake tonight for forgiveness." Gavin nodded. "I won't." Kate's voice lowered, but the word hung there, dangerous and hopeful. Gavin didn't lean in. He didn't reach. He just waited. Kate exhaled. "But you didn't ruin it." Gavin's throat tightened. "That's more than I deserve." Kate's eyes stayed sharp. "It's what you earned tonight, nothing more." Gavin nodded, accepting the boundary like a gift. Kate drove home with her hands steady on the wheel. She didn't feel dizzy with romance. She didn't feel weak with nostalgia. She felt something rarer, clarity. Gavin's pride was being dismantled not by humiliation but by her boundaries and his consistency. And her heart, still cautious, still scarred, was beginning to consider a possibility she once refused to entertain. That some men return not to reclaim what they lost, but to become the kind of man worthy of what they once threw away. Kate whispered to herself in the quiet of her car, "Keep watching," because trust wasn't a spark. It was a structure, and she was finally strong enough to build one that couldn't collapse again. The weeks after that dinner didn't turn into a fairy tale. They turned into something harder, something real. Kate didn't wake up suddenly softened, and Gavin didn't become a hero overnight. Life kept pressing in, patience, budgets, farm calls, late-night emergencies, but under the noise of daily survival, something new began to grow. Not romance, not forgiveness, trust. Thin as a thread, fragile as glass, and built one choice at a time. Gavin understood the pace, and for once, he didn't try to force time to obey him. He asked before he stepped into her world, "Is it okay if I stop by the clinic meeting? Is it all right if I help with the outreach schedule? Do you want me there, or would you rather I don't?" Each question was a small confession. "I don't get to assume I belong." Kate noticed how he didn't sulk when she said no. He didn't withdraw affection to punish her. He didn't make her feel guilty for protecting herself. He simply accepted her answer and kept showing up where he could serve without demanding intimacy. And in that consistency, Kate began to feel less trapped, because she had lived through the opposite, a man leaving without permission, without warning. Now she was the one holding the door, and Gavin was learning to knock. One morning, Kate arrived at the hospital and found a new sign installed near the community clinic entrance. It wasn't flashy, just simple lettering: Rural Care Clinic, walk-ins, welcome. No one turned away. Beneath it, a smaller plaque named the donors. Not Gavin, not his company, not any hometown success story. Just funded by community partnership. Kate stared at it longer than she intended. The "no one turned away" line hit her like a quiet vow. She turned toward the administration office and found Gavin already there, leaning against the hallway wall, waiting like he belonged nowhere by default. "Did you do this?" she asked. Gavin nodded once. "It's what you've been trying to do for years." Kate's eyes narrowed. "Why no name?" Gavin's voice was steady. "Because this isn't about me feeling better. It's about people getting help." Kate held his gaze, and for the first time, her expression softened. Just a fraction. It wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. He was learning the difference between redemption and reputation. The town noticed too, but the gossip had changed. It became less about, will she take him back, and more about, he's different now. Kate hated that people talked like her heart was a community vote. Still, she couldn't deny that Gavin was reshaping the narrative with restraint. He avoided the diner crowds, declined interviews, stayed focused on the hospital's needs. He learned the names of nurses, maintenance workers, volunteers, people his old pride would have ignored. He apologized to the janitor he once dismissed during a rushed meeting years ago, and the man blinked like he'd never expected to be seen. Kate heard that story from a nurse and felt something tighten in her throat, because she knew how it felt to be unseen, and she knew how rare it was for a man like Gavin to admit he'd done that to others too. That mattered, not as romance, as character. One afternoon, Kate had to drive out to the farthest farm in the county. A pregnant woman needed a checkup but refused to come into town because her husband couldn't miss harvest. Kate loaded supplies into the clinic van and found Gavin already there, holding the passenger door open. "I didn't ask," Kate said, stopping short. Gavin nodded. "I know." Kate narrowed her eyes. "Then why are you here?" Gavin's voice was calm. "Because you're going alone, and last time the creek road flooded. I'm not trying to control you, I'm trying to protect the mission." Kate stared at him, testing for manipulation. She found none. She exhaled. "Fine, but we're not turning this into therapy." Gavin's mouth twitched. "Understood." Kate climbed in and Gavin drove with the same careful focus he'd shown before. The road was long, the sky gray, the fields stretched like endless patience. Kate stared out the window and realized something unsettling. She felt safer with him there, and she didn't know what to do with that. At the farm, the woman, Lydia, was tense and guarded. Her husband hovered, protective, suspicious of outsiders. Kate kept her tone gentle, professional, steady. When Lydia flinched during the exam, Gavin stepped outside without being told, giving privacy instinctively. Kate noticed. Later, when Lydia's husband snapped, "We don't need charity," Gavin didn't correct him with pride. He just said, "Then don't call it charity. Call it community." The man blinked, thrown off by the humility. Lydia's eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "Thank you," as if she'd been waiting to hear those words her whole life. On the ride back, Kate glanced at Gavin. "You handled that well," she said. Gavin kept his eyes on the road. "I'm trying to learn how to show up without ego." Kate's voice was low. "You used to lead with ego." Gavin nodded. "I thought it kept me safe." Kate looked away. "It kept you alone." Gavin didn't argue. He just accepted the truth like a man who had finally earned it. That night, Kate got a call that made her stomach drop. Marin's voice was tight. "Kate, the clinic building. The old one. There's smoke." Kate's body went cold instantly. She threw on her coat and drove fast, headlights slicing through the dark. When she arrived, the volunteer weekend repairs they'd worked so hard on were threatened. A faulty heater in the back room had sparked, smoke curling out of a broken window. Firefighters were already there, moving quickly, but the building looked fragile in the flashing lights. Kate stood in the gravel lot, hands shaking, helpless anger burning her throat. Not because of the building alone, because she had built that clinic out of pain, out of survival, out of purpose. And watching it threatened felt like watching her own growth being tested. Then she heard a familiar voice behind her. "I'm here," Gavin said. Kate turned and saw him stepping out of his car, face pale, eyes sharp with urgency. For the first time in years, the presence of a man didn't feel like danger. It felt like support. The firefighters contained the blaze quickly, but the damage was real. Smoke had ruined supplies. Part of the roof interior was charred. The waiting room walls were stained black near the ceiling. Kate walked through the building with a flashlight, heart pounding, throat tight. It smelled like burned plastic and loss. She stared at the damage, and for a second the old helplessness returned. The feeling she'd had reading Gavin's letter, standing alone in the silence. Her eyes burned, but she forced herself to stay composed. Then Gavin stepped beside her, careful not to touch. "We'll fix it," he said quietly. Kate's voice was sharp with grief. "You can't fix everything with money." Gavin's eyes held hers. "I know." Then he added softer, "So I'll fix it with presence." Kate's chest tightened, her control slipping for half a second. Because presence was the one thing he hadn't given her before. And now, he was offering it, like a vow. The next morning, Gavin was already at the site before sunrise. Not with a press team, not with a check in hand. With work gloves, boots, and a thermos of coffee. He coordinated contractors, arranged temporary clinic space, called suppliers himself. He didn't do it from a distance. He climbed ladders, hauled debris, scrubbed soot off walls until his arms shook. Kate arrived and found him kneeling on the floor, wiping black streaks from the baseboards with a rag. The image hit her harder than she expected. This was a man who once couldn't face her eyes when leaving. Now he was on his knees cleaning up something that mattered to her, without being asked. Not for applause, not for forgiveness, just because it was right. Kate stood in the doorway too long, heart tightening, the air thick with smoke and something else. Something like hope. but heavier. Because hope always asks you to risk again. Maren pulled Kate aside outside, voice low. "He's not doing this for show," she said. Kate's jaw clenched. "I know." Maren's eyes softened. "Then what are you afraid of?" Kate looked back through the broken window at Gavin working inside, shoulders tense with effort. "I'm afraid," Kate admitted quietly, "that this is real." Maren swallowed. "And if it is?" Kate's voice cracked just slightly. "Then it changes everything." Maren nodded slowly. "Maybe everything needs to change." Kate looked away, blinking hard. She wasn't ready to name her feelings, but she couldn't deny them anymore. Later that afternoon, as they reviewed the temporary clinic schedule, Kate's hands started shaking without warning. It wasn't dramatic, just a tremor she couldn't control. She stared at the chart, annoyed at herself. Gavin noticed immediately and stepped back, giving her space. "What do you need?" he asked softly. Kate's throat tightened. "Nothing." Gavin didn't push. He just said, "Okay, I'll be right outside." Then he walked out. No pride, no wounded ego, leaving her alone with her breath. Kate sat down on a broken bench, chest tight, and realized this was the first time a man had seen her struggle and didn't demand she comfort him about it. He didn't make her manage his reaction. He simply respected her boundaries, and that respect was healing in a way she didn't expect. When Kate finally stepped outside, the cold air hit her face like a reset. Gavin stood near his car, not approaching, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground as if waiting for permission to exist. Kate walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "I'm not okay," she admitted quietly. Gavin lifted his gaze slowly. "I know." Kate swallowed. "This clinic, it's not just a building. It's my proof that I survived." Gavin's eyes shone. "Then we'll rebuild it the way you rebuilt yourself," he said. Kate's throat tightened. "How?" Gavin's voice was steady. "Slowly, honestly, without shortcuts." Kate stared at him, the words hitting deep. She nodded once, then whispered, "I don't want pity." Gavin shook his head. "I don't feel pity. I feel respect." Kate's chest tightened sharply, tears threatening. Respect was what she deserved from the start, and hearing it now felt like a delayed justice. As evening fell, the workers left, and the site grew quiet. Kate stayed behind, sitting on the hood of her car, staring at the damaged building. Gavin approached slowly, stopping at his usual respectful distance. "Can I sit?" he asked. Kate hesitated, then nodded toward the other side of the hood. Gavin sat, keeping space between them like a sacred rule. They watched the sky darken, the first stars appearing. After a long silence, Gavin spoke, voice low. "I used to think love was something you deserved only when you were perfect," he said. Kate didn't reply. Gavin swallowed. "And when I realized I couldn't be perfect, I left before you could see it." Kate's voice was tight. "You left so you could control the ending." Gavin's eyes closed. "Yes." Kate's jaw clenched. "And you controlled it by destroying mine." Gavin's voice broke. "I know." He stared at the ground, and for the first time Kate saw him truly crumble. Not theatrically, just quietly, like a man finally allowing consequences to touch him. Kate's chest tightened painfully, not with pity, but with a strange ache she couldn't name. She wanted to stay hard. Hardness had kept her alive, but she also knew that staying hard forever would keep her alone. Kate inhaled slowly, then said, "I don't know if I can forgive you." Gavin flinched, then nodded, eyes wet. "That's fair." Kate swallowed. "But I can't deny what you're doing now." Gavin looked up, surprised. Kate's voice stayed steady. "You're showing up." Gavin's breath shook. "I'm trying." Kate's throat tightened. "Trying isn't enough." Gavin nodded. "Then I'll do more." Kate stared at him, and her voice lowered. "Don't do more to win me. Do more because it's who you are now." Gavin's eyes held hers with a fierce sincerity. "It is," he whispered. "I want it to be." Kate nodded once, like a verdict forming. As they stood to leave, the wind turned colder, carrying the smell of smoke and wet earth. Kate reached for her keys. fingers numb. She dropped them by accident, the metal clinking against gravel. Without thinking, Gavin bent down to pick them up. His hand brushed hers for a fraction of a second, skin to skin, accidental, brief. Both of them froze like they'd touched fire. Gavin's eyes widened, and he pulled back immediately, respectful, careful. Kate stared at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. The contact was nothing, and yet it felt like the first crack in a wall she'd spent years building. Gavin's voice was hoarse. "Sorry." Kate swallowed, breath unsteady. "It's fine," she said. But her voice betrayed her, because it wasn't fine. It was significant. It was terrifying. It was alive. On the drive home, Kate's heart wouldn't settle. She replayed the moment, annoyed at herself. A brush of fingers didn't erase a letter left on a table years ago. It didn't erase nights she cried alone, wondering if she was unlovable. But it did something she didn't expect. It reminded her she still had a heart. Not just a mission. Not just a disciplined life built from pain. A heart that could still respond to presence. Kate pulled into her driveway and sat in her car for a long minute, breathing. The porch light glowed warm, steady. She remembered writing in her notebook, "My life will not be a question mark." Now the question wasn't about Gavin's absence. It was about her courage. Did she have the courage to risk a new ending? The next day, Kate arrived at the clinic site and found a small wooden sign leaning against the wall. It had been hand-painted carefully, not professionally. Simple letters, slightly uneven, sincere. "We will rebuild." Kate stared at it, surprised. Gavin appeared behind her, hands dirty, face tired. "I made that," he admitted quietly, almost embarrassed. Kate blinked. "You?" Gavin nodded. "I didn't want a contractor sign. I wanted something honest." Kate's throat tightened unexpectedly. It wasn't about the sign. It was about him choosing humility over perfection. Kate's voice softened just slightly. "It's good." Gavin's eyes lifted, hopeful, but cautious. "Yeah?" Kate nodded once. "Yeah." Gavin's breath shook, like her approval meant more than any boardroom win. Kate looked away quickly, protecting herself from the emotion rising. That night, the clinic stood quiet under the stars, half damaged, but not defeated. Kate locked the temporary supply trailer and turned to find Gavin waiting near his truck. He didn't approach. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, posture patient. Kate walked closer, stopping in front of him, the distance smaller than before. "I'm not ready to say I forgive you," she said. Gavin nodded. "I know." Kate's eyes held his. "But I'm ready to keep letting you show me who you are." Gavin's throat worked, eyes shining. "Thank you." Kate exhaled slowly. Then, before she could overthink it, she reached out and placed her hand on his forearm. Brief, firm, intentional. Not romance, not surrender. A signal, a choice. Gavin froze, breath catching, as if her touch was the holiest thing he'd ever been given. Kate pulled away quickly, heart pounding, but her voice was steady. "Don't make me regret that," she whispered. Gavin's voice was broken and sincere. "I won't," he promised. "Not ever again." The rebuild didn't happen in a day. It happened in mornings that smelled like sawdust and coffee, and evenings that ended with tired hands and quiet victories. The clinic rose back slowly. New beams, clean walls, stronger wiring, safer heat. Kate kept leading like she always had, clipboard in hand, voice steady, standards high. Gavin kept showing up like a promise he refused to break, even when no one was watching. He didn't try to charm the town into forgiving him. He tried to become a man whose actions made forgiveness possible. And Kate, cautious, scarred, wise, kept watching, not for perfection, but for truth. As the weeks passed, the season changed again. Leaves fell from the trees like old versions of people letting go. The air turned colder. The fields went quiet after harvest. Kate's life stayed full. Work, community, purpose. But it no longer felt like a fortress. She began letting Gavin into small places. A 5-minute conversation after meetings, a shared coffee at the diner without tension, a ride to a farm when time was tight. She didn't do it because she was lonely. She did it because Gavin wasn't asking her to become smaller to make room for him. He was making himself safer to stand beside her. And that difference changed everything. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Kate found herself laughing. It startled her, the sound, warm and real, slipping out before she could guard it. Gavin looked at her like he'd just seen sunrise for the first time. He didn't reach for her. He didn't turn it into a moment. He simply smiled softly and said, "I miss that." Kate's eyes sharpened, reflexively defensive. "Don't use the past to pull me," she warned. Gavin nodded immediately. "I won't," he said. "I'll just be grateful it still exists." The restraint in that sentence landed deeper than 1,000 romantic speeches. Kate swallowed hard and looked away, pretending the cold air was why her eyes stung. The grand reopening of the clinic was scheduled for the first Saturday of December. Not a flashy ceremony, just the town gathered in coats. Lights hung along the porch, a table of homemade pie and coffee. Kate insisted it stay centered on the community, the nurses, the volunteers, the families who needed it. The mayor tried to make it about Gavin, of course. He brought a microphone, a printed speech, a grin that smelled like politics. But when he offered Gavin the stage, Gavin surprised everyone. He stepped back and said clearly, "This isn't mine." Then he turned toward Kate and added, "She built this when I left." The crowd went quiet. Kate's chest tightened, because recognition, public, honest recognition, was something she never received in those early years. And Gavin, standing there humbled, gave it to her without trying to take credit for himself. That was pride being destroyed the right way, not by humiliation, but by truth. After the ribbon was cut and people toured the rooms, Kate slipped away to the back hallway to breathe. The clinic smelled new. Fresh paint, clean wood, possibility. She leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion she hadn't prepared for. She had built this out of pain. She had rebuilt herself in silence, and now she was standing inside proof that she didn't break. Footsteps approached softly. Gavin appeared at the end of the hallway and stopped immediately when he saw her. "Do you want to be alone?" he asked. Kate swallowed, shaking her head once. "No." Gavin stepped closer, slow, careful, like he was walking toward something sacred. He stopped a few feet away. Kate's voice was quiet. "Thank you for not making today about you." Gavin's eyes shone. "I made enough things about me already." Kate exhaled, and the sound came out like relief. Then, with a steadiness that surprised her, she said, "I want to talk. For real." They went outside behind the clinic where the wind was quieter and the string lights glowed soft against winter dark. The town noise faded behind them, and for the first time it felt like they weren't performing roles. Kate looked at Gavin, really looked. At the lines of fatigue, the honesty in his eyes, the way he held his hands like he didn't want to take anything without permission. "I need to say this," Kate began, voice firm. Gavin nodded. "I'm listening." Kate's throat tightened. "When you left, I didn't just lose you." Gavin's jaw clenched, shame rising. "I lost my sense of worth," she continued. "I lost sleep. I lost trust. I lost the version of me that believed love was safe." Gavin's eyes glistened. He didn't interrupt. Kate swallowed. "And the worst part was, you didn't even respect me enough to give me truth." Gavin's breath shook. "I didn't," he whispered. Kate held his gaze. "So if you want redemption, it can't be a story. It has to be a life." Gavin nodded slowly. "It is," he said. "I'm choosing it every day." Kate's voice went lower. "Then hear me. I'm not forgiving you to save you." Gavin's throat worked. Kate finished, quiet but powerful. "I'm forgiving you because I refuse to stay chained to what you did." The words hung in the cold air like a release. Gavin's pride cracked further, not because she needed him, but because she didn't. Because forgiveness was her strength, not his reward. Gavin's eyes filled and he looked away, swallowing hard. "I don't deserve that," he said. Kate nodded. "I know." Gavin's voice broke. "Kate, I came back thinking I could fix it." Kate's eyebrows lifted slightly. Gavin exhaled, ashamed. "But you can't fix what you don't own, and I don't own you." Kate's chest tightened because that sentence was what she had waited years to hear without knowing it. I don't want to own you, Gavin continued, voice rough. I want to honor you. Kate stared at him, lips pressed tight as emotion surged. Gavin stepped back half a step, giving her space even while he unraveled. I'm sorry, he whispered, and this time it wasn't a word thrown to ease his guilt. It sounded like a man laying down weapons. I'm sorry I loved you and still chose myself. I'm sorry I left you with questions I was too proud to answer. Kate's eyes burned, but her voice stayed steady. Then answer one now, she said. Gavin looked up. Anything. Kate's jaw tightened. If you get scared again, what will you do? Gavin didn't hesitate. I'll stay, he said. I'll tell you the truth while I'm afraid, and I'll let you see me imperfect. Kate's throat tightened painfully. Gavin added softly, because losing you once taught me that pride isn't strength. It's cowardice with a suit on. Kate let out a breath that shook. Then she nodded once as if something inside her finally unlocked. Snow started to fall. Soft, slow, almost unreal. The lights on the clinic porch glowed warm and the flakes drifted through them like tiny prayers. Kate stood there breathing, feeling the past and present collide inside her chest. She remembered the night Gavin left. The storm, the silence. Now there was snow instead of thunder. There was truth instead of absence. Kate took one careful step closer. Gavin stayed still, as if he didn't trust his own body not to rush. Kate lifted her hand and placed it against his chest, over his heart. She felt it beating hard under her palm. Do you understand? She whispered. That coming back didn't make you brave? Gavin nodded, breath caught. Kate's eyes held his. Staying will. Gavin's voice was barely audible. Then I'll stay. Kate's hand didn't move away this time. It remained there like a vow being written without ink. The next thing Gavin did wasn't a speech. It was the smallest, most devastating act of humility. He dropped to one knee, not on the stage, not in front of the crowd, behind the clinic, in the quiet, where no applause could make it easier. Kate froze, heart stuttering. Gavin's hands trembled slightly as he looked up at her. This isn't a performance, he said, voice raw. Kate's throat tightened. Gavin swallowed. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to let us build something new. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple ring. Elegant, timeless, not flashy. But he didn't hold it like a purchase. He held it like surrender. I want to choose you out loud, he whispered. Every day. Even when it's hard. Kate's eyes filled instantly, and she hated how much she wanted to believe. But she also knew belief wasn't weakness. Belief after pain was courage. Her voice came out shaking. Gavin, he didn't interrupt. He just waited, like he finally understood that love doesn't demand. It asks. Kate took a step back, not to reject him, but to breathe. The snow fell thicker now, softening the world like mercy. She stared at him kneeling there and saw the full arc of what had happened. A man who once ran to protect his pride was now on his knees, risking rejection without defense. That was what her pain had done. It taught her to recognize real change. Kate swallowed, wiping a tear she didn't want to admit existed. You're still successful, she said softly, almost surprised by the thought. Gavin blinked. What? Kate's voice steadied. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm not here to punish you by taking your life apart. Gavin's eyes shone. Kate continued, voice firm. I want a love that doesn't require either of us to lose ourselves. Gavin nodded quickly. Yes. Kate's chest tightened. And I want honesty so complete it's uncomfortable. Gavin's voice broke. Yes. Kate exhaled. Then she said the sentence that destroyed the last of his pride. Not by cruelty, but by truth. I'm not choosing you because you came back. I'm choosing you because you learned how to stay. Gavin's breath left him like a sob. He bowed his head, shaken, humbled, undone. Kate stepped forward again. Slow, deliberate. She reached down and lifted Gavin's chin gently, forcing him to meet her eyes. You will never leave without answers again, she said, voice low and unbreakable. Gavin nodded, tears slipping despite his effort. Never. Kate swallowed. And you will never make me feel like love is something I have to earn by being perfect. Gavin's voice was barely there. Never. Kate's eyes burned. If you're scared, you tell me. I will, he whispered. Kate held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once like a final signature. Yes, she said. Gavin's face crumpled with relief so intense it looked like pain. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stayed kneeling for a second longer, as if standing again would feel too arrogant. Kate let out a breath and almost laughed through tears. Get up, she whispered. Gavin rose slowly, like a man reborn. They didn't kiss right away. Kate didn't rush. She rested her forehead against his for a long moment, letting their breath mingle, letting her heart catch up to her decision. Gavin's hands hovered near her waist, waiting for permission. Kate nodded slightly, and only then did he touch her. Gentle, careful, reverent. Kate closed her eyes, the snow landing in her hair like tiny blessings. She felt his arms wrap around her, not tight, not possessive, present. And for the first time in years, she let herself lean into someone without fear of being dropped. Gavin whispered into her hair, I'm here. Kate's voice was soft but steady. Stay. Gavin's breath shook. Always. Then Kate lifted her face and kissed him. Slow, deep, intentional. A kiss that didn't erase the past. A kiss that redeemed it. Inside the clinic, the town kept celebrating without knowing what had just changed outside. But Kate didn't need witnesses. She didn't need applause. Her heart had made its choice in quiet snow, not under stage lights. When they walked back around to the front porch together, hands loosely linked, the crowd noticed anyway. Marin's eyes widened, then softened with tears. The mayor stopped mid-sentence, stunned. A few women gasped softly, but the loudest sound was the silence. A collective understanding that something real had happened. Not a reunion for entertainment. A redemption earned. Gavin didn't lift his chin like a victor. He kept his head slightly bowed like a man grateful he'd been forgiven at all. Kate stood beside him, calm, radiant in her strength. And in that image, the town finally learned the truth. The ending didn't destroy Gavin's pride by breaking him. It destroyed it by proving Kate didn't need him, and still chose him anyway. In the days that followed, life didn't become easy, but it became honest. Gavin attended meetings with the hospital board and listened more than he spoke. He used his success to protect the clinic long-term, endowments, staffing support, emergency funds. He didn't control Kate's work. He supported it. Kate remained the leader she had become, unshaken by romance. She didn't shrink into being the woman beside the successful man. She stayed Kate, steady, capable, respected. And Gavin loved her for it openly, without ego. The ring on her finger wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder. Love is an action, repeated. One night as they sat on her porch with blankets over their laps, Kate looked out at the fields. The moonlight turned the land silver, quiet and wide. Gavin sat beside her, close but not crowding, hand resting lightly over hers. Kate spoke softly. Sometimes I still remember the porch the night you left. Gavin's breath tightened. I know. Kate turned her head. And sometimes I'm afraid of that memory. Gavin's eyes held hers. Then let me stay with you inside it, he said. Kate swallowed hard. Gavin continued, voice steady. I can't erase what I did, but I can refuse to repeat it. Kate's eyes glistened. You'll have to prove it forever. Gavin nodded once, unflinching. Good, I plan to. Kate exhaled, then leaned her head on his shoulder. Not because she was weak, because she was safe enough to rest. And that was the real miracle. On New Year's Eve, the town gathered again. Small fireworks, hot cocoa, laughter spilling into cold air. Kate stood with Gavin near the old bridge, watching lights reflect on the river. The same place that had once held her alone. Now it held them both, older, wiser, rebuilt. Gavin looked at her and said, This time last year, I didn't think I'd ever deserve to be here. Kate's voice was soft. You didn't. Gavin's mouth twitched with a rueful smile. And now? Kate stared at the river. then back at him. "Now you're learning," she said. "And I'm choosing." Gavin's eyes filled. "I'll never stop choosing you." Kate held his gaze. "Then we'll be fine." The countdown began behind them. 10, 9, 8. And when midnight hit, Kate kissed him again, smiling through tears. A fresh start, not because time changed them, but because they did. Later that night, after the crowd dispersed, Kate and Gavin drove home slowly. Snow drifted lightly, the world quiet, as if holding its breath. Kate rested her hand on the ring, feeling the cool metal, the weight of promise. Gavin glanced at her at a stop sign, eyes soft. "You're still the strongest person I've ever known," he said. Kate's lips curved slightly. "Don't romanticize my pain." Gavin nodded. "I'm not." He reached over gently, waiting until she nodded before touching her hand. "I'm honoring what it built," he said. Kate looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "That's all I ever wanted." Gavin swallowed, voice thick, and I was too proud to give it. Kate's eyes held his. "Not anymore." Gavin nodded fierce. "Not anymore." The car moved forward, headlights cutting through dark like a promise kept. On the first morning of the new year, Kate woke up to quiet sunlight on the walls. The house smelled like coffee, Gavin's coffee, because he'd woken early to make it, as if small acts were sacred. Kate walked into the kitchen and found him by the window, looking out at the fields. He turned when he heard her, eyes soft, calm. "No running today?" she asked quietly. Gavin smiled gently. "No running," he promised. Kate stepped closer, slipped her arms around him and felt him hold her back, steady, present. Outside, the town began another year, unaware of the private redemption that had taken root. Kate rested her head against his chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, love didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like an answer, built slowly, bravely, by two people who finally chose truth over pride. Gavin came back thinking he could fix the past with success and regret. But the miracle was never his return. The miracle was Kate becoming the kind of woman who didn't need closure to keep living, and still had the courage to choose love again when it was finally safe. Their redemption didn't happen in speeches. It happened in early mornings, in consistent presence, in work gloves and quiet apologies, in a man who stopped running, and a woman who stopped shrinking. And that's why their ending didn't destroy him by breaking him. It destroyed his pride by teaching him what love actually costs: truth, time, and staying. Kate didn't forgive because she forgot. She forgave because she refused to be chained to the worst moment of her life. And Gavin didn't win her back with money. He earned her trust with actions that never demanded reward. A rebuilt clinic, a rebuilt heart, a new beginning that didn't erase the past. It redeemed it. The last time the town saw them that winter, they were walking past the clinic porch lights, snow falling soft around them. Gavin's hand in Kate's. Kate's head lifted, eyes calm. And when he leaned down to kiss her, slow, deep, sure, there was no doubt left in the air. Not because love was easy, but because love was chosen. If this story made you believe in love again, even just a little, don't leave without doing one thing. Subscribe to Redeemed Hearts and join us for more powerful second chance stories where love is proven through actions, not words. And comment, "I choose love again," so I can heart your comment and know you're part of this community.